Have you ever waited your entire life for someone? Have you felt that deep connection with a person that transcends time and distance? Listen to my story. I need to know if I did the right thing or what you would have done in my place. This is a story about patience, destiny, and a love that refused to die. My name is Eleanor Richards, and I'm 68 years old now. But this story begins when I was just 18 in the small coastal town of Marblehead, Massachusetts. It was the summer of 1975, and everything about that season felt magical, charged with possibility. I can still remember the salt in the air, the way the sunlight danced on the harbor water. And most of all, I remember James. James Sullivan walked into my life on a Tuesday afternoon at my father's bookstore. I was working the register, shelving new arrivals, when the little bell above the door chimed. And there he was, tall, with dark hair that fell just above his shoulders, wearing a faded blue t-shirt and jeans, looking around with curious eyes that finally landed on me. "Do you have any Kerouac?" he asked, and his voice sent something electric through me. I'd never felt that before, that instant recognition of another soul. "On the road?" I asked, already stepping out from behind the counter. He smiled, and it transformed his face. "Actually, I was looking for Dharma bums." That summer with James was everything. We spent endless days on the beach, nights talking until dawn, dreaming about our futures. He was a student at Berkeley, only in Marblehead for the summer to work, on his uncle's fishing boat. He had plans, big plans, to become a photographer, to travel the world capturing stories through his lens. And I had dreams too, of becoming a writer. We were young and so certain about everything. "We'll go together," he'd say, his fingers intertwined with mine as we lay on a blanket under the stars. "We'll see everything, Eleanor. I'll take the pictures, and you'll write the stories." But life has a way of intervening in even the most beautiful dreams. By August, my mother fell seriously ill. "Cancer," the doctor said, "terminal." My father was devastated, and as the only child, I couldn't leave. I had to stay, had to help. James understood. He said he would defer his return to Berkeley, stay with me in Marblehead. "No," I told him on that last night together, my heart breaking even as I spoke the words. "You can't give up your scholarship. You can't put your dreams on hold. Go back to California. I'll join you when I can. I'll wait for you," he promised, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, his hands cupping my face. "However long it takes." We made plans. This was before cell phones and email, so we would write letters every week. And when it was over, I would join him in California. We would start our adventure then. The first letters came regularly. Thick envelopes filled with his elegant handwriting, telling me about his classes, about Berkeley, about how much he missed me. I wrote back, pouring my heart onto the pages, telling him about my mother's good days and bad, about how the bookstore was struggling, about how every night I dreamed of California. 3 months after James left, my mother died. It wasn't peaceful like they show in movies. It was painful and messy, and left my father a shell of a man. The funeral was on a rainy Thursday, and I waited for James, certain he would come. He didn't. No letter came that week either. When I finally heard from him, the letter was different. Shorter. He was busy with finals, he explained. He couldn't get away for the funeral, but he was thinking of me. The letters became less frequent after that. His life was moving forward while mine felt frozen in place. My father needed me. The bookstore needed me. James's letters spoke of new friends, exciting projects, a photography internship that might lead to work with National Geographic. I was happy for him, truly. But with each passing month, The distance between us seemed to grow. By the following summer, his letters stopped completely. I wrote one final time, asking if he had met someone else. The letter came back marked, "Return to sender, address unknown." I tried to find him. This was 1976, and there was no internet, no easy way to track someone down across the country. I called Berkeley, but they couldn't give out student information. I wrote to his uncle in Marblehead, but he said James had taken an assignment overseas. Life moved on, as it must. My father's health declined, a slow collapse after my mother's death. I took over running the bookstore entirely. I dated occasionally, but no one ever made me feel the way James had. No one ever seemed to understand the person I was inside. At 32, I married Richard Harrington. He was kind and stable, a local high school English teacher who loved books as much as I did. He knew about James. I never hid that summer, that love, from him. Richard accepted that there was a part of my heart he would never fully reach. "We all have our ghosts," he told me once. "The people who shape us and then disappear." We had a good marriage. Not passionate, but comfortable and respectful. We had 2 children, David and Sarah, who brought immeasurable joy into our lives. The bookstore thrived under our joint care, expanding to include a small cafe. When my father passed away in 1990, Richard helped me through my grief. Life was good, different from what I had imagined at 18, but good. I tried not to think of James, of what might have been. Some nights, though, I'd find myself looking at the stars and wondering if he was looking at them too, somewhere in the world. In 2001, Richard was diagnosed with heart disease. For 5 years, we fought it together, medications, surgeries, lifestyle changes. But in the end, his heart simply gave out. He died holding my hand, telling me he'd had a wonderful life with me. I was 50 at the time, our children grown with families of their own. The years after Richard's death were difficult. The loneliness was crushing at times. David wanted me to sell the bookstore, to move closer to him and his family in Chicago. But the store was my anchor, my connection to everything I'd ever been. I couldn't let it go. I threw myself into community work instead. I started a literacy program for underprivileged children. I hosted author events and book clubs. I kept busy, kept moving, because stillness invited too many regrets, too many what-ifs. Then came 2015. Technology had transformed the world. My grandchildren were teaching me how to use Facebook, insisting I needed to get with the times. Sarah had set up an account for me, showing me how to find old friends, how to post pictures of the bookstore events. "Mom, you should try to find some of your old friends," she suggested one Sunday afternoon visit. "It's amazing who you can reconnect with online." I laughed it off, but that night, alone in my house, I sat down at my computer and typed a name I hadn't allowed myself to say aloud in decades. James Sullivan. Nothing relevant appeared in the search results. There were countless James Sullivans in the world, it seemed. I tried adding Berkeley and photographer to narrow it down. Still nothing that seemed like him. I almost gave up. Then I remembered his dream, National Geographic. On a whim, I searched James Sullivan photographer, National Geographic. And there he was. The picture accompanying the article was of an older man, his dark hair now silver, lines around his eyes. But I would have known him anywhere. James Sullivan, award-winning photographer, had just released a retrospective book of his life's work, documenting environmental changes around the world. My hands trembled as I read the article. He had done it. Everything he'd dreamed of, he had accomplished. The article mentioned he was based in Portland, Oregon, after years of traveling. It listed upcoming book signing events. One was in Boston, just an hour from Marblehead, scheduled for the following month. For weeks I debated whether to go. What would be the point after all this time? He probably wouldn't even remember me. Or worse, he would remember me as nothing, more than a summer romance, a footnote in his adventurous life. But something pulled at me, an invisible thread that had stretched but never broken across 50 years. I needed to see him, even if just from a distance. I needed to know he was real, that summer hadn't just been a beautiful dream I'd constructed to comfort myself. The day of the book signing, I drove to Boston in a state of nervous anticipation. The bookstore was crowded, people lining up with copies of his book, witnessing change 5 decades. Through the lens. I stayed at the back of the room, watching as he spoke about his work with passion and humor. He was still so handsome, his movements still carrying that easy grace I remembered. He spoke about his travels, about the importance of documenting our changing planet, about the power of images to move people to action. When the formal presentation ended and people lined up for signatures, I almost left. This was enough, I told myself. I had seen him. I knew he was well, successful, seemingly happy. What more could I want? But my feet wouldn't move toward the exit. Instead, I found myself joining the line, a copy of his book clutched in my hands. My heart pounded so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. As the line moved forward, I rehearsed what I might say. Should I remind him who I was? Should I pretend to be just another admirer of his work? And then I was standing in front of him. His head was bent down, signing a book for the person ahead of me. When he looked up, his pen poised over the page, his eyes met mine, and time simply stopped. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I saw the recognition dawn in his eyes, watched as 50 years melted away in an instant. "Eleanor," he said, my name a whisper on his lips. Not a question, a statement of wonder. "Hello, James," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. The line behind me faded away. The bookstore, the city, the whole world contracted to just this moment, just us. "How," he began, then stopped. "You're here." "I am," I said. "I saw an article about your book, about the signing. I live in Marblehead still. I never left." Something passed across his face then. Pain, regret. I couldn't quite name it. "Can you wait?" he asked. "Until this is done? Please." I nodded and stepped aside, finding a chair near the window. For the next hour, I watched as he continued signing books, talking with people. But his eyes kept finding mine across the room, as if making sure I was still there, that I hadn't disappeared. When the last person had left, and the bookstore staff began cleaning up, he walked over to me, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "They're closing soon," he said, handing me one of the cups. "There's a small park across the street. Would you walk with me?" We sat on a bench in the fading light of the summer evening, 2 strangers who had once known each other so completely. The silence between us was heavy with unasked questions, with 5 decades of separate lives. "I wrote to you," I finally said. "After my mother died. For months I wrote." He looked down at his hands, weathered now from age and work. "I never got those letters, Eleanor. Not after the first few months." "What happened?" "My roommate," he said, his voice tight with old anger. "He was jealous, I think. I talked about you constantly, about how I was going to bring you to California, how we were going to travel together. He started hiding your letters. I only found out years later, when he confessed during a drunken reunion. I felt a surge of emotions. Anger at this unknown roommate who had altered the course of our lives, grief for what might have been. "I tried to find you," he continued. "I came back to Marblehead the next summer, but the bookstore was closed. Someone told me your father was ill, that you'd moved away to care for him. We never moved, I said, confusion clouding my thoughts. The store closed temporarily while Dad was in the hospital. But we reopened. We were always there. He shook, his head, a bitter smile crossing his lips. Misinformation. Wrong assumptions. Bad timing. It seems like everything conspired to keep us apart. What happened then? I asked, needing to know the story of his life, the chapters I had missed. He told me about his career, how he had traveled to over 60 countries, documenting environmental changes, indigenous cultures, conflict zones. He had married twice, once in his 30s to a fellow journalist, a marriage that ended after 3 years when their career paths diverged, and again in his 40s to an environmental scientist who had died of a stroke 5 years earlier. He had one daughter, now living in Australia with her own family. And you? He asked. Tell me about your life, Eleanor. So I did. I told him about taking over the bookstore, about marrying Richard, about my children and grandchildren. I spoke about the literacy program, about the changes in Marblehead over the decades, about how I'd never stopped writing, even if only in journals that no one else would ever read. As night fell, and the park lamps came on, casting pools of light around us, we fell silent again, each absorbing the shape of the other's life. Do you ever think about it? He finally asked. That summer? What might have happened if things had been different? Sometimes, I admitted. On quiet nights. When I look at the ocean. When I read Kerouac. He smiled at that, the same smile that had captivated me half a century earlier. I named my daughter Eleanor, he said quietly. My ex-wife thought it was just a name I liked. I never told her about you. It felt too sacred somehow. Tears filled my eyes then, for all we had lost, for the parallel lives we had lived without each other. What do we do now, James? With this knowledge? With this meeting? He reached across the space between us and took my hand. His touch was different, the smooth hands of a boy now replaced by those of a man who had lived a full life. But the connection, that electric current, was exactly the same. I have another book signing in New York next week, he said, and then one in Chicago. But after that, I'm free. My home in Portland is just a place I keep my things. I've never been good at staying still. I've never been good at moving, I replied, a small laugh escaping through my tears. Maybe, he said carefully. It's time we both tried something new. We talked until midnight, exchanging phone numbers, email addresses, making tentative plans. He would finish his book tour. I would arrange for my assistant manager to take over more responsibilities at the bookstore. We would meet again in a month. Give ourselves time to process this unexpected reunion. As he walked me to my car, he stopped under a streetlight, turning to face me. I've seen some of the most beautiful places on this planet, he said, his voice low and intense. I've witnessed sunrise over Machu Picchu, watched the northern lights dance across Arctic skies, seen whales breach in Antarctica. But nothing, Eleanor, has ever taken my breath away like seeing you today. He kissed me then, gently, a kiss that held all the tenderness of our youth and all the wisdom of our years. When we parted, I felt 18 again, but also exactly my age, 68, with a life lived, with joys and sorrows and lessons learned. 50 years, I whispered. We lost 50 years. He shook his head, tucking a strand of my silver hair behind my ear. We didn't lose anything, Eleanor. We lived. We became the people we are now. And maybe we needed to become these people to find each other again. That was 3 months ago. Since then, James has visited Marblehead twice. I've been to Portland once. We talk every day. Long conversations where we're still discovering each other, still filling in the missing decades. He's showing me how to use Instagram. I'm introducing him to my grandchildren over FaceTime. We're planning a trip to Italy in the spring. The first of many adventures, we hope. I don't know what the future holds for us. We're not young anymore. We have health concerns, established routines, children who look at us with a mixture of happiness and concern. But we have something precious, a second chance, a love that somehow survived 50 years of separation. Last week, as we walked along the same beach where we had spent that magical summer, James stopped and pulled something from his pocket. A small, worn book, Kerouac's Dharma Bums, the same copy he had bought from my father's store all those years ago. I kept it, he said, placing it in my hands. All this time. It was my talisman, my connection to you. Inside the cover, he had written something new. To Eleanor. The beginning, the middle, and now perhaps the end of our story. With love that transcended time. James. Is it crazy to start again at our age? To rearrange our lives for a love that was born 50 years ago? Some of my friends think so. My son is worried I'm being impulsive, but my daughter Sarah says she's never seen me happier, more alive. The truth is, I don't feel like I'm starting something new. It feels like I'm continuing something that was interrupted, like I'm finishing a book I had set aside but never forgotten. The characters are older now, wiser perhaps, but the story is the same. So I ask you, did I do the right thing by opening that door to the past? By allowing James back into my life after all these years? Or is this a beautiful folly, a desperate attempt to recapture something that belongs to another time? If you were in my place, what would you do? All I know is that when he holds me now, with his photographer's hands that have captured the world, I feel like I've finally found my way home. And maybe that's all that matters in the end. Finding your way home, no matter how long the journey takes. So here we are, James and I, writing a new chapter neither of us ever expected. Two people who loved and lost and lived, now given a chance to discover what might still be possible. Time is precious now. In a way it wasn't when we were 18. We don't waste a moment of it. As James said to me last night, we may have missed 50 years, Eleanor, but that just means we have to make every day count from here on out. And that's exactly what we intend to do. If you've ever wondered if some connections are truly timeless, if some people are meant to find their way back to each other no matter what, well, now you know my answer. But what's yours? Would you have taken this leap? Would you have opened your heart again after so many years? I'm still figuring it all out myself, one day at a time. One moment with James that I never thought I'd have. I'd love to hear what you think. What would you do if fate finally brought you face to face with the love you never forgot? Would you be brave enough to begin again?